Definitely YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and Apple. I think those four are fine. I don't think anything else is necessary.
What do we plan on labeling the podcast?
BRGK podcast. I don't know. That seems good enough.
This is why I was thinking you just run it for a couple weeks and then figure out what you're gonna do with it.
What do you mean run it?
We just talk.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I'm here to talk. That's been my whole point. I'm less here for like the whole. Yeah, Chris, are you hosting?
What?
Are you hosting?
Am I hosting what?
Let's say who's the first person who talks on the podcast?
All three of us are hosts.
We're all hosts is the problem. So.
Who's introducing the podcast? Who's like, okay, welcome to...
I guess I'll introduce it.
Chris can do it. We can also take turns. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a little bit irrelevant, but yeah, I guess
like let's say for example, let's say the guest we're bringing on is my guest. Then I'll introduce it.
Exactly, right? That's correct. Yeah. I think that's...
Or if the subject is about me, then I'll introduce it, right?
Okay.
But in this case, since it's about the path, Chris will introduce it because he started the path.
Right.
Sounds good. So welcome to the prequel of our podcast. I guess I'll start with where I'm from and my birth.
Since you're saying this is the prequel, let's record this as like a trial for the actual origin story episode.
I was literally just thinking of having it be the origin story.
You run the free form into it?
Exactly. What I mean is like, this is complete. Yes. Like literally, because let me put it this way. Anybody that ends up listening to this podcast later is first going to be like, who are these fucktards and what is going on? But they're going to end up hearing us slowly form the podcast. You get me? It's like,
right.
It's like that one God that
they're getting to know us
out of clay, right? Like, yeah, they're getting to know us and they're seeing how three people who have no idea what the hell they're doing, because this is the first time we're ever trying to do a podcast, literally make the podcast as we go, right?
All right, so we're leaving this in the cut.
Exactly. So we basically just bullshitted our way through the beginning of this, and we're using something called Craig to record off of Discord. None of us are even remotely close to each other right now, and we decided to have this podcast because we want to get our voices out there. And honestly, Okano Soup is in here just because I know he loves to talk and he wants to discuss and he likes the intellectual part of the podcast. That's why he's here from my perspective.
We might as well name this podcast Big Brain Boys.
Yeah.
Do we want to go by nicknames or...
No, let's go Adam, Danny. Let's go by first names. Dante or Chris?
Whatever. Just leave me as Chris. I don't really give a fuck. So, okay. I really don't care. It's too little information, I think. So, okay. For my purposes, this podcast is to hopefully help people who end up listening to it later just get a better idea of their thoughts and their path in life. And hopefully a lot of people that are out there that are lost will end up listening to at least the origin story part of this podcast, where we talk about the path of the Busa riding God King, and hopefully they kind of find themselves and start living a happier, stress-free life. So I'm just going to go ahead and explain a little bit about my background in a TLDR format. But
before I
start that, yeah, go ahead.
You gave me an idea. You said why you're interested in doing this podcast, and that's making me think that we should all say that.
Okay, so go ahead. Why are you interested in doing it?
I didn't know particularly why until just now when I had thought about it, but I see this podcast as an excellent tool for me to get used to talking not only about myself, but improvisationally. And this format of the podcast of, doing it raw, doing it live is super key to that. I see that now. It's going to be an excellent tool to help me progress as a talker.
Okay. Makes sense. And Danny, why are you here?
Fairly close, honestly, for the reason I've always had an interest in speaking. I think talking in general helps you figure out what you're doing or what you're thinking, what you're feeling. So there's that aspect. Plus, I like talking to Chris. I like talking especially about some of the ideas that we've had recently. And I figure I may as well. So I'm here.
I love it. All right. So I'll give a quick TLDR about my background, and then I guess Adam can go after me. So basically, TLDR, I had a very blessed childhood if you consider the global perspective, because it's not like I was fucking struggling to eat or anything like that. But I come from a Latin background, so and then very early on, my parents divorced, so I was just living with my mom. My mom worked all the time, so I didn't really have that much of a relationship with her, which got me into internet culture because I started playing the equivalent of heroin, which is called World of Warcraft. And
Digital heroin.
digital heroin, exactly.
Only $15 a month.
So that's where I made a lot of friends, internet community and the gaming community. And then I was honestly really insecure and like fucked up in up through middle school. And then when I got to high school, I kind of started coming out of my shell a lot more, especially once in my junior year of high school, I moved to Miami. I started coming out of my shell a lot more, and I don't know, I started waking up to the way things were in the world. And from there, I went to college, and in between my freshman and sophomore year of college, I smoked weed, and I completely went off the rails after that because it's kind of like everything I had ever thought that I knew was just gone now. Like everything just shattered. So once I smoked weed once, I just went on this rampage of like, oh man, there must be so many things I said no to just because I allowed the influence of others to steer me away from them. Let me try those things out, right? Even if they weren't particularly good for me. Nothing too crazy, but I did do salvia once, and I've taken shrooms, a couple psychedelics, nothing too nuts, but for the average person, that is kind of nuts already. Then basically recently, I ended up fucking my life up completely, and I'm. Oh yeah, by the way, if you're on this podcast and you're listening and you're gonna get butthurt about specific words being used, just direct all the hate towards me because I'm gonna use the most of those words. So I was a complete retard, all right, and I basically got into a hit and run accident, and then I ended up turning myself in, but the other people were injured, so I'm now a felon, and I'm on house arrest. And during that, I also was in a super toxic relationship when I got put on house arrest at the beginning, and I was actually with her. And then when I separated from that toxic relationship, I stopped smoking weed completely, and I basically turned my life around 180. I started writing a lot. I published 3 books. I started streaming more consistently. I haven't missed a day of working out since I broke up with that girl. And I started realizing that after a few weeks of following this path, I was just like consistently happy. So I decided to like write down all the life lessons that I learned over the course of my life. And I ended up writing a book called Positivity Through Adversity, 20 Commandments to Guide You, which is just kind of it's a helpful mentality that if you follow the 20 commandments, you end up living pretty stress-free. And then what ended up happening is my friend Adam, who's in the podcast right now, I ended up encountering him and realizing that he was kind of like underwater and that I could help pull him out of the water. So I started trying to talk to him about some of the things in the 20 Commandments. And when I noticed that as I scratched away at his mental prisons, the societal pressures, the family pressures, the things that were holding him down, I noticed that it was like I was scratching a dog's stomach. His tail was wagging. So I noticed, hey, I can keep doing this. Like he actually wants to change. He doesn't want to be stuck underwater. And so from there, we just had more and more conversations. And then, now he is where he is. He's doing great. Everything's, going awesome in his life right now. He's lost like 20 pounds or so by now. And that kind of motivated me that, hey, this isn't something that just worked for me. Like this can apply to other humans. So that's kind of how I got to here. And that's pretty much it. That's TLDR.
I'll try and keep it brief. Like Chris, in the global scale, I was also born pretty blessed. I was born in a first world country, specifically America. And I was born with a fantastic family. I'm a younger brother of an older brother, so it's just me and him, and my mom and my dad. Hey, Chris, mute your mic if you're gonna eat chips.
Sorry. I'm not used to this shit, man.
Yeah. Okay. So, like I said earlier, this is going to be a good exercise for me to talk about myself because I don't do it that often. I talk about myself in the moment, but not in the past. And frankly, it's because I have a lot of regret in my past because I kind of see my life as a division between before I was a human and now that I am a human. And to put that into perspective, I led most of my life as kind of like a spoiled brat, to put it simply. I did what I wanted when I wanted. My parents hardly punished me. You know, I became very addicted to video games when I was in my early teens, not even my preteens. And that, stunted my education for a little while. And because of that, my parents and I came to a conclusion that I hate my school and I needed to leave. So I went to a boarding school for 2 years to finish my high school education. And that was like the pivot point. That's when my life really started to change. I met so many new people from different countries and different heritage and different culture. And I started to really see how, narrow my viewpoint was. I got to enjoy physical exercise for the first time over there when I was at the boarding school. You know, I got to realize what it meant to be healthy or even to aspire to be healthy. And after I graduated this boarding school, I started college. And of course, the freedom, I was not ready for the freedom. Similar to Chris, I started smoking a lot of weed and I still played video games and I didn't really do anything at all. And eventually I come back to where I lived, where I went to high school originally with my parents. And that's where I had originally met Chris, in that high school. And we weren't the best of friends, but we were good friends. And as I got to reconnect with him, I got to see him through his struggles. I got to see him through his worst and his best as well. And yet we still remained friends throughout that. So that was like a strong forging of our friendship. And eventually it came up to the last few years of my life, specifically the last year, where I got really not physically intimate, but intimate with Chris about life itself and my purpose and direction. And Chris started mentoring me about, wising up, becoming more mature, realizing who I am and what I am and my mistakes and the things I need to learn. And through that, I've evolved into a new person, into the person I am now. And I see myself progressing towards the future because of that. And yeah, that's kind of like the TLDR I am right now.
Yeah. And I think both of you, Chris and Adam, have touched on a very common experience that a lot of people have, and is really what I was going to tell my background, or what I was going to focus on while telling my background. And it's that change from kind of on a whim or listlessness or just moving through life without any direction, and then suddenly becoming responsible for everything. So I had similar, right? Latin background, not a great place, but that's honestly not as important as some of the stuff that I felt going through it. That my parents divorced early. I had to move away from one half of my family. Didn't want to. I was too young to understand what was going on. Moved between schools pretty often and don't really have friends from childhood, but going back to high school or so. Went to a college only because I heard somebody else say that they were applying. Did my major because one of my friends told me that I could, so I did. And graduated without a job, so I kind of just applied to a bunch of different places. There was this series of increasingly important decisions that I needed to make that I didn't have an active part in making. And that difference now, I started realizing through college and after college especially, that I needed to start thinking about these decisions and making them proper, right? Taking my time and really considering the options. And that changed into somebody who has agency and is responsible for their own things, their own life, their own characterization, how they define themselves and how the world views them, is that change that I feel the most now. And I think that I'll continue to feel the most in the next couple of years. And is also the reason why I'm on the podcast, because I want to explore that. And I think this will be a good way to do it.
Well,
Dope.
This is a peculiar time to have it, but I think it's actually appropriate now that we've introduced what we are. But we should definitely introduce who we are. We haven't given our names, which we've talked about each other through our names, but we haven't introduced ourselves. So I guess I'll start. I'm Adam Mataway. I'm currently 23 years old, and I was born in Miami, Florida, which is where I was raised the majority of my life.
Before
you don't have to give
continues,
your last name.
No. Before anybody else continues, Adam, could you tell me who you are?
I am a human, a devout human, who is becoming the best he can be.
Sweet. All right, Daniel, if you would like to introduce yourself.
I'll take third. I'm good.
Oh, you'll take third. All right. So, I'm Chris, otherwise known as dantedrackis.
You can
I
find
was
him on
born in
Pornhub.
Holland. Yes, you can. I was. Thank you. I was born in Holland. I moved around a lot as a kid. I was raised mainly in Sarasota, Florida, but my senior year of high school, I was in Miami, and my senior year of college, I was in Miami. So, I'm basically American to a degree. Like, a lot of the cultural background of Dutch people is no longer with me because that was only a small child. And as far as who I am, like Adam, I just consider myself a human that is trying to be the best he can be. I do a lot of shit, honestly. I box, play video games. I write. I'm doing a podcast. Oh, like not like Adam, not like that
You're doing a
squeeb, you know.
podcast?
Oh, wow.
Why
Not
didn't you
like
tell
that
me?
squeeb. Bro, get out of here, bro.
All right, I'm sorry,
I'm
I'll
the
leave.
podcast guy. I'm the. So, okay, yeah. Basically, I don't know. I do a lot of shit. I'm just trying to be the best I can be. And honestly, the more that this goes on, I feel like I can help people. I think that as far as my purpose in life, it's to help people. I want to help people find their way.
Endearing.
That's it, Danny. I'm done. Roger out.
I'm Danny. I was also born in
Wait, hold up. I thought you were just gonna go, I'm Danny.
The cold cut? Yeah, no. I was born in Miami, Florida, to a very Latin family. Mom and dad said.
Oh yeah, mindfuck. By the way,
Yeah,
Adam.
yeah.
He was born in Miami.
Yeah. Probably within, I don't know, 20 miles of where you were born, honestly. Miami,
Wow.
There's only so many places you can live nearby, right?
It's a sprawling city.
That's true. Yeah, so outskirts and stuff. But born in Miami. I forgot what else I was supposed to say.
You said you were talking about you were born in a Latin family. Which you
That's
mentioned.
pretty much it.
Who are you?
It's a stupid question, one. But I don't think it matters all too much. And I don't really know how I define myself. I'd ask my friends, because I do think right now other people can tell me who I am more than I can tell myself who I am.
Perfect. I'll take charge then. I got you. All right, so Danny.
Wait, hold on. I am doing some stuff to kind of fix that and look back on my life and try and see those things that keep happening or keep coming up that I can attribute to habit and maybe character, And before Chris disparages me, I'm not a bad guy. All right.
Well, let me disparage you a little bit too. Actually, that's the wrong word. I think this is more playing a little bit of devil's advocate. You said, I think specifically you said something along the lines of you're no one in particular, or like you rather. No. I remember what you said. You said I don't really care about.
Oh, stupid question. Stupid question. Yeah.
And I think that's wrong. That's the only thing you should care about is becoming who you are and realizing who you are. And like Chris said, I hope like we're gonna be here to hopefully help form that mold, which you can. And from a learning experience of my own, Chris helped, show me my mold, but you yourself have to fit into it.
I think for me, what maybe I was getting at, I'm not 100% sure, right? I don't know why I really said it, but I said it. Defending it, I would say that I don't really care about who I end up being as long as I am that person. I'm not sure how I would describe it.
No, I got it. That makes a lot of sense. Is that right now he does not know?
I don't know what I would
call know where he. Yeah, exactly, and he doesn't have a name for it. Like, for example, for me, I said my purpose is to help people. I didn't define it as who I am. I didn't say like, oh, I'm a prophet or something, because I guess I could put that term on it because if I want to preach and help people. Like, I'm kind of like a priest without a religion. You know?
If I were to go down that route, it would be that my purpose right now is to analyze really how people build their purpose. That would be the largest thing that I think I'm focusing on right now.
Yeah. So now me, as someone who knows Danny, I would say that especially recently, he's kind of a philosopher. Like, honestly, like, that's how I would describe him. Like, he's a philosopher in the sense that he's very good at analyzing thought.
So he's open-minded.
And logic and argumentation. Yes. He's very open-minded. And when it comes to discussing specific things, he tries to see every perspective possible and analyze why it's there, He doesn't just accept things, oh, this is this way because X. It's like, no, but maybe there's Y, or maybe during it.
And that's some high praise, honestly. I am trying.
That's good. I mean, frankly, I've gone through this experience before where Chris praises me, and wow, this is really idolizing Chris, but that's not where I'm taking this. I'm taking this to like a whole, Chris, would compliment me on something that, maybe I've been trying to improve on. And I'll sit there and I'll think to myself what you just said, Danny, which is, but I'm just trying, this is not something I did through subconscious effort. This is something I'm doing through conscious effort. And that's the key right there. Like, something I've learned, which as I've changed myself like so much throughout my life, is you change yourself. If you, let's say this is a very physical example, but let's say you're overweight and you want to lose weight. You have to do that yourself. But on a mental example, let's say you look at someone that you think is ugly and you think to yourself, God, that person's ugly. And then if you ever catch yourself doing that and realize what a terrible thing it is, it's up to you to constantly catch that and to constantly realize that until you reach a point where you stop thinking that. You'll become disgusted in yourself every time that crosses your mind, and that'll become consistent to a point where it stops. So as far as mental attitude goes, you have to change yourself.
I'm so wet, baby.
Yeah?
Is that making
Thanks for the high praise, motherfucker. All right. So yeah, the thing is, one of the important things that I established with Adam recently when I was helping him form his mold and shit was that, okay, I gave him a prize. Mm-hmm.
I want to retake back what I said about mold. I don't like the form mold because it's restricting.
Yeah, it's more like I gave you a direction. And it's not even that it's not even that I pointed. I just said, yo, fucking move in a direction, Adam. Like, you're sitting still, go, right? That's all basically what I did. And here's the thing is that it's very important to give some praise when it's warranted, right? But at the same time, the amount of times Adam said, I love you, I hate you, right? To me directly because I called him stupid shit, right?
Hold on.
Was incredibly high. And that's something very important, is that sometimes you need the voice of reason next to you to just slap you in the face when you're doing something, let's say, unreasonable or not progressing you towards your better state as a human being. So an example is when Adam went on his road trip, he told me he wasn't working out because they were busy all day, and I just told him to stop being a bitch and wake up 30 minutes earlier than his friend who was on the road trip with him and to do it then. And he was like, God damn it, you're right, I have no excuse. And then that was that,
you said before in your introduction that something you wanted to do is help people find their own direction or find the meaning in their lives and to live well. Adam is one of these people that was receptive enough to where you pushed. You wouldn't walk up to a stranger and
do this. No, hell no.
them lessons.
No.
Right. If you walk up, like for instance, if you see someone in a gym and they're working out with bad form, you just can't walk up to them and say, that's wrong. You have to do it like this. Because they're, especially in a gym-like setting, they'll be prideful about working out.
Yes.
And you can't, but for instance, if you talk to them,
mm-hmm.
Well, hold on. If you talk to this person and if you invite them out and you get to know them and you start, really, getting closer to them, and then you talk to them and say, listen, the reason I wanted to get to know you is to help you. I saw that you were working out incorrectly and I want you to become better at this. Then you'll have a chance at helping them.
Correct. They'll be more receptive to it because you have a relationship. So the only exception to that rule is when I used to actually work at a gym as a personal trainer, I would walk up to people all the time and tell them, hey, like, do you want me to, and this is all about phrasing. So instead of saying, hey, you're doing that wrong, I would say, hey, would you like me to show you a way that you can get better results from that exercise? And then because I phrased it in that way, they're more receptive and like wanting to say yes, because who the fuck doesn't want results?
Well, this is also a great point to talk about merit.
That too.
Merit was a huge key to that in.
Yeah, because I was a personal trainer and I worked at the gym, so I obviously knew what I was talking about. All right, so without further ado, I want to pass this on to Danny so that we can go through. We have well, first, I guess I'm going to quickly tell the origin story of this group.
Whoa. I got it. I think I got it. Not the whole group in general, but I think it'll be a good start for this topic.
Okay. Go nuts.
I was on the bus to work, and I got a text message from Chris that told me about this podcast. And we've been talking fairly frequently, a lot more recently than we have in a long time. And he wanted to invite me onto this podcast to talk about his way of life. In a sense, his way of life and how he shares his ideas with others. And I thought, great, good. If I find something wrong, I can try and help him fix it. It'll always be good to cross-analyze these ideas. But we started talking about the idea before we ever got to the podcast. So now I'm here to try and take a third-party perspective and walk through this way of life that he has.
Well, first, I wanted to kind of explain the origin, but Danny kind of explained it
for this
right?
group, really.
For this group. Yeah, so because the origin story I was going to explain is where the name...
Well, people don't know what we're talking about. What is it exactly that we're talking about, Chris?
So it's a group. I don't want to call it a cult because cult has negative connotation, but now that I've thrown the word out there, it's kind of like a cult. It's more of a brotherhood, let's say. But I don't want to exclude females. It's a humanhood. All right. And the name of it is called the Busa Riding God Kings. All right. Where that stemmed from, some other day we'll get into it. But the idea is that the people that are in this group, they're like a family. Everybody who is a Busa Riding God King is a brother or a sister to another Busa Riding God King. And that we all are trying to work together towards a relatively common goal. Which is to create a nice, tightly knit family, while at the same time, all of us are individually working towards our own goals, right? And we help each other work towards our own goals. So, for example, I'm trying to go with, what's it called? I'm trying to become world champion. And so Adam will spar with me to help me train.
World
champion boxing. Sorry, world champion boxing. So Adam will spar with me to assist me in reaching that personal goal that I have. And if Adam had a personal goal of, okay, I want to get jacked.
I actually have a personal goal, which I didn't have before, is to win a CrossFit competition.
Perfect. So now Adam has the goal of winning a CrossFit competition. And I've been training him for the past 2 months or so. And I've created a workout plan for the remainder of my house arrest for him and I to follow, and another friend. And so as he strives towards trying to win that CrossFit competition, I can help design the workouts since I have the personal training background. So the idea is that we all come from different backgrounds, we all have different skill sets, and that we combine those skill sets to help each other towards our individual goal, but also to kind of build a community, a family-like feeling.
And so, that's the most important part, is a family. And this is something that Chris helped me realize, especially recently during a tough time with my born family, is the key to growing up and the key to growing old is to form a family. And literally that means get a wife or a husband, or, regardless of your partner, and start a family with them. But it's more expansive than that. Truly, it means find the people you want to be close with, those friends who you trust, those friends who you want to trust, who you rely on as a pillar. Those are your family. Not completely exclusively. Anyone who you want to include in this, who you feel you can trust to include in this, is your family. And that is, in my eyes, is the key to growing up. It's that creating that group, that community of people that you surround yourself with.
Completely. And I think that it's very important that when we create that community feel, that family feel, that we create a place that people can kind of belong to, because I feel like right now, especially due to social media and the kind of disarray that the world is in right now, especially in America, that there's a lot of people out there that are lost. They're depressed, they're anxious, they don't know what they're doing, and they're just kind of sitting still. And I kind of want to help give them a place to belong, but not without work. Here's the thing, is like, being a Busa riding God King doesn't come without massive amounts of personal effort striving towards it, it's not like we're just going to accept anyone right off the bat. And it's we the number one mentality we have is there's no us versus them, if you want to be one, you can, but there's obviously steps that you need to take, because if we just go, okay, anybody can be a Busa riding God King, they don't even need to have the desire to be one, they can just be one, then there's no value in being a Busa riding God King. So there are some, let's say, like prerequisites, quote unquote, to get into the group. But once you're in, that's like a family that you can rely on. And the idea is that we try to treat other people, like even the ones that are not in our family, as if they're inside of our family. Like we try to treat them with respect and dignity. If people are mean or rude to us, we just kind of turn the other cheek, like, whatever, and move along.
I mean, it sounds like you're making these personal connections, and it's good that you make these personal connections with people outside of the group as well, to try and invite them. But in order to be considered part of that group, you need to have some ideal or ideas about how you want to live your life, and why living your life in that way is good, not only for you, but in general, so that other people can also pick up from your style of life and be part of that group.
And I want to clarify a little bit. It's not, Chris likened it to a cult, but I don't liken it to a cult at all, because we're all right now, even though we are all Busa riding God Kings, we all live our own lives. I am in college finishing my degree. Danny, I don't even know anything about Danny, but he is a brother. It's that simple. Chris trusts him. Chris knew him. Chris met him, and Chris is introducing him. And because of that connection is made for me. I trust Chris, therefore I trust Danny. But the important thing is, I and Danny and Chris all have friends and family outside of the Busas that are still, that I still love and hold dearly. But yeah, that's another point. The ideal of being a Busa is also the weight of being a Busa. The things on our shoulders is our need to help others. When we see our friends who are struggling with the things that we break out of, it is almost our duty to then take charge and help them out of it, to earn their trust and assist them in the ways we can. And if we can't, we'll at least learn from it so that we can help others. But like Chris said, saying the word can't is wrong. It's not about can't. It's about, I didn't in the moment. But there's always another opportunity for that. But I'm getting off topic. I'm leaving the tropics. I'm getting off topic about the things I wanted to be concise about, which is, it's not a cult. It's not. It's just. Some people can consider it a friend group, but it's much more than that to us. It's a family.
And it's like you said, Adam and I can implicitly trust and at least get along with one another because we both are considered to be a part of this group. We both have qualities that Chris thinks would make us people who are able to respect each other just by virtue of knowing that, right?
Correct. I also think that it's almost as if because when Adam and I were talking recently, we spoke that we were at the vanguard of the Busas, meaning that we were at the head of the pack. Let's say that we are the ones that are directioning the Busas, because every Busa is supposed to be in charge and directioning their own existence, meaning that towards their own personal goals, they have to be the idea is to make them their own captain of their own ship, right? But Adam and I are kind of like the heads of the fleet, we're the two ships in the fucking front, like leading the whole army of ships in a direction as a whole. Even if the other ships, they go off course for a little bit to go, do their personal goals, at the end of the day, we're all a huge fleet, a family. And the idea is that I find the reason that I wanted to bring Danny into the group is because I feel he has aspects and qualities that would be useful to have specifically at the vanguard, because otherwise I wouldn't have been so adamant and, let's say, as aggressively pushing towards Danny and talking to him a lot about the Busa ideals. I would have, taken my time with it and developed it slowly. Instead, I wanted to be a little more aggressive about it because I felt that he would be of use at the vanguard to help organize the rest of the, the Busa group and push them towards a goal quickly and efficiently.
Which also lines up with something that I want to do, which is try and help others. Yeah. But also through experience, find out how people find what they want.
Yeah.
All right. That's the key word right there, is experience. We as the people who are in front and trying to cut a path through the forest are learning the mistakes firsthand. And we're using the transparency amongst ourselves to use each other as walls. So by being honest with each other, specifically amongst our this group here, we are able to criticize and critique one another and learn from that. The hardest part about a lot of professions, especially artistic professions, is taking critiques. And it's a skill. When you can take critique, you can become so much better, so much more quickly, because you're improving with other people's help. And that's the focus of this group, is to utilize each other as a wall to bounce off of so we can get higher.
Now, I can feel it in these things that we're talking about, that we're going off topic, because there are so many small things that, they're big, but there are so many things that we want to touch on because we feel it and we know it to be true, right? That we want to talk about, but we are going all over the place right now.
Yes, that's why
massively.
That's why for right now, I think this is okay, because this is like the origin story podcast, so they can kind of feel that we have some level of enthusiasm and like we actually give a shit about what we're talking about. We're not just talking about this. Let me
just say, I do want a discussion that starts from the moral value of this group and builds a foundation for people to understand where all these other things are coming from. A proper, well-formed discussion with an outline for everything, because that's going to be the best way to try and convey it. Yeah.
So, do you want to pause and make an outline?
No. I think it's fine. We just do this now and we come back and revisit.
Correct. I think we can just continue with this podcast as it is. And then the idea is, let's say next week when we have, let's say, an episode 2 of this podcast, well, episode 1 really, because it's like the prequel. When we have the episode 1,
this is episode 0.
Yeah, this is episode 0. When we have episode 1 of the podcast, we just we literally have a document that has the steps to becoming Busa, right? And the very first step is basically talking about the mentality, the positive mentality required to become a Busa. So I think what we can do is, to finish off this podcast, we can touch on one of the steps.
And we can run more or less a practice.
So Danny can take one of the steps and we can kind of talk about it, right? Try to take one that isn't going to be a humongous, like, for example, number 5.
Come on.
Number 5. Yeah, I know. But number 5 is live by your word. Let's just jump on that one right now. And then when we go to the next podcast, we'll take a couple of them, right? We'll take a couple of the steps. Like, let's say 2 steps. Every podcast we'll go over, we'll go over 1 step per podcast. Let's be real. It's going to be a lot, you know? So we'll go over 1 step per podcast.
No, I think
explain my path.
I think you're wrong. I think we can cover the steps concisely as long as we don't delve.
That's because you don't understand. You haven't had enough experience talking with Daniel yet, and you don't understand how well he will play devil's advocate.
I play devil's advocate because I believe there's reason in it, and I'm not explicitly playing devil's advocate. I'm exploring possibility.
No, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. No, but that's what I'm saying. I'm saying it's a good thing. I'm saying it's a good thing.
But you also have not seen me try to have a concerted effort within a time restriction to speak about a topic concisely and clearly, which is something that I think we all lack, in great experience, and which I think is also why I think your idea of tackling one of these things at the end, even as a trial, is very important, because we can come back and listen to our explanation and see where we started dropping these other ideas into it, and maybe starting branches or starting tangents of other ideas that we want to talk about, but maybe aren't needed to answer this question.
Yeah, and then figure out a way to restrain whenever we start going on those.
All right.
By
so
experience.
Considering that we are right now, I'm going to start, step 5, which is live by your word. I'm going to read it out so I don't have anything else to say.
Sounds good.
Live by your word. Be straightforward and honest with everyone around you. When you say you're going to do something, do it. Otherwise, you will go nowhere and you will be seen as unreliable. Do not say, I promise, unless you are willing to die to fulfill that promise.
This touches on a lot of classic sayings that we've heard before, right? You're only as good as your word. To be a man, you have to be a man of your word. There's a phrase that literally, a man of your word. And there's this time-old wisdom that being somebody who lives up to their word is seen as a moral good or something that's generally valued by society. So there's a lot of knowledge that maybe some people have heard about before and maybe dismissed or maybe live by it themselves. Why is this in the path of the BRGK, Chris?
Why is living by your word in the path of the Busa writing God Kings? That was your question?
You have a couple of sentences here that say, you'll go nowhere and be seen as unreliable.
Correct. Okay, so let me explain why I considered it a necessary step in being a Busa writing God King. So, and this is going to be difficult because I'm going to try not to touch on some of the other things that are part of the Busa writing God King path.
I would say as a direct consequence, if you fail to live by your word, why does that exempt you?
Why does that make you not a Busa writing God King if you fail to live by your word?
And then you can work backwards from there so that we focus only on this one topic.
Okay, so the reason that not living by your word makes you not be a Busa writing God King is because if I say, right after I finish this podcast, I am going to do leg day, which, you know what, I'll go ahead and say it. After this podcast, I am going to do leg day, right? I'm saying that because that is legitimately my intention. I legitimately intend to do leg day after this podcast. That is just the truth. And because you two are Busas, well, I guess technically Danny is not there yet, but you know what, get on your knees, the sword, I'm knighting each side of your head, you're a Busa, fantastic, let's move on. So now that you two are Busas, basically, because I am telling you that I'm going to do leg day after the podcast, if tomorrow you call me and you ask me, hey, did you do leg day after the podcast? I'm going to tell you yes, because that's exactly what I intend to do, and it's the truth. It develops a relationship of trust with the other Busas or with anybody that you tell anything. So if I tell someone, that's the part of you'll be seen as unreliable / you'll go nowhere. part of not being Busa when you say something and don't fulfill it is because if you don't fulfill it, then you're not being true to yourself, let's say, your own intention. And you'll
Give
go
an example.
nowhere.
Give an
Okay,
example
so-
of you saying you're going to do something and then someone seeing that you're not doing it, and then explain the repercussions.
Okay, so I'll go. There's two. There's two tokens to this. The you will go nowhere and you will be seen as unreliable. So I'll go ahead and do an example for each. So in the you will go nowhere, right, would be if I told someone that I wanted to gain muscle. So I told them from now on I'm going to eat 3,000 calories a day, and I tell Adam this, right? Regardless of Adam's involvement, like, okay, sure, if Adam sees me in a year and I'm still the same size and I'm still the same weight, right, then Adam might not inherently trust me when I say, hey, I'm going to do X, because now I've given him direct proof that, hey, I said I was going to bulk up. I said I was going to eat 3,000 calories a day, and I clearly have not, right? That's part of the you'll be seen as unreliable, right? But at the same time, it's also part of the you will go nowhere, because if I don't eat the 3,000 calories a day, I will end up nowhere. I'm not going to bulk up if I don't eat the 3,000 calories a day, or higher than 3,000, let's say. So it's important that when you say that you're going to do something, that you do it, but it's not just important for other people's view of you, right? It's also important for yourself, because if you don't do it, you won't accomplish whatever you're setting out to accomplish.
So there is a underlying thing here where you shouldn't say things that you don't mean, because the only things that, and this is more of an unreliable standpoint. I think that this honestly has two parts to it, where one part is the external, where people can only judge you by what you tell them and what you do. And the mismatch between those is going to build distrust. They don't know what you're thinking. they can take a guess, but they don't know what you're thinking. It can only really take what you're telling them. And this is what makes you unreliable when you break that, or when you lie, essentially, or fail to live up to your word. The other part about not going anywhere is that internal, where you betray your own desire, or you betray your own directive, or something that you told yourself that you were going to do. And from an internal perspective, that is where you may start to even see yourself as unreliable, and as a consequence, not manage to progress or not manage to change your situation.
I agree. I think that when you start to see yourself as unreliable, that also leads to feeling kind of lost and feeling like who am I kind of questioning of yourself, which stops you from moving.
I have a personal experience with this. I equate it to, digging yourself into a hole. For a while, I was really addicted to nicotine. When I was smoking weed, I was also vaping nicotine from vapes. And eventually I got addicted to the Juul. And you get to a point where, it's bad for you and you want to try and quit. And you stop, maybe for a few days, maybe for a week. And that itch is always there scratching you. And eventually, you might tell yourself, and you might tell others, like in my case, I'm throwing it away, I'm done. And then you, like a week later, you just get back into it and you're using it, and you're telling yourself it's okay, but you lose that trust in yourself, and you stop taking your own words seriously. You start realizing that, oh, I can say things and it makes it okay for the moment. But in the long run, it has no weight whatsoever. And, to contrary to that, Chris helped me break that completely. Chris helped me, he made sure that I was stopping, and he made sure that I stopped smoking nicotine. And it got to a point where long enough in, I started to realize, like, every time that itch came up, every time I wanted that scratch, I would just ignore it. I would just, stop for a second. Although that's nicotine addiction. That's a whole other discussion.
Right. But it's something about building the reliability of the things you tell yourself, even, and not allowing it to become a habit where you ignore what you tell yourself or what you intend to do. Because by ignoring it and by building that relationship that you have with your own will, I guess, it starts to become less and less important.
Yeah, and you also end up accomplishing or achieving less and less, in the sense that you feel like you can't even tell yourself, like, oh, I'm going to clean my room, And when you say it, even when you say it to someone else, you don't even feel like you're actually going to do it a lot of the time. You know, you're like, oh, I'm going to clean my room. And then like 5 months go by and you haven't cleaned your room once because you don't have that reliable relationship where when you say something, you're kind of bound to it, right? And that's part of why the living by your word is so important, is that
Right.
once you vocalize it, you're fucked. Like when I said right now on the podcast, after this podcast, I'm doing leg day, I cried a little internally because I realized, shit, now I'm actually going to do leg day directly after this podcast instead
I'm gonna have to do
of
leg
doing
day today as well.
Yeah, instead of doing something like chill for a little bit and then doing leg day, like immediately as soon as this podcast is done, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go do leg day because I said I was going to do it. And so now I'm kind of bound to it because of that's how the path works. That's part of the reason that it's one of the steps to becoming a Busa riding God King.
In a way, it's an extremely valuable tool. It is a necessary tool because you can use it against your own problems. You can say, shit, I have this project and I know I've been setting it off for the past 2 weeks, but it's due in a week or it's due in 2 days or it's due tomorrow. If you just stop and say out loud, I'm going to do this project right now, you are now bound by your trust in yourself. And if you ever break that, then you are breaking the path.
I see. The external vocalization helps you internally resolve that as something that you're going to do, that your willpower will not let you cheat, and that your reputation would be hurt if you didn't. On the whole of this point, living by your word ensures that both internally and externally, you are somebody who gets things done. Yes, sometimes you say them out loud and then you proceed to get them done. But also internally, you become a person of stronger resolve, somebody who can go out and do those things that they want to do, even if they don't think that it'll be a good or a nice experience, but things that they want to do regardless. So this part, I'm not sure what to refer to it as, this step of becoming a Busa is one that makes you efficient in pursuing your desires and reputable, trustworthy to other people as a consequence of that.
Correct. And part of the importance of living by your word is, first of all, is also for the future purpose of the Busas, meaning that for me, my purpose is to help people. So if I can turn someone else into a Busa, I will. That's why I took the time with Adam to try to mentor him. But the reason I was able to mentor Adam is because when I told Adam I was going to do XYZ thing, I just did it. So Adam started realizing, hey, Chris isn't fucking around anymore. Like when Chris says, hey, we're going to do X workout, you know, hey, we're going to eat exactly 1,500 calories. That's exactly what we did. So it builds this relationship of, I can trust Chris. I can rely on what Chris is saying to me. I can rely on it. So at that point, I can mentor someone by expressing just my words alone can reach you now. It doesn't you don't have to actually experience the downfall of something. The perfect example I can give is Adam was kind of driving a little bit aggressively the first couple weeks that he was here in Miami. And then one day I was just having a conversation with him about how driving is all RNG. RNG, for those who are listening and don't know, is random number generator. It's basically just randomness. So I explained to him that driving is like RNG. It's just probability. It's statistics that someone's not going to throw themselves into you randomly, right? And that if you drive aggressively, you're just increasing your chances that you're not going to be able to react in time or avoid a situation where you might have a collision. And if you drive more passively and pay attention to everything around you, it's less likely that that'll happen. Not that I distrust Adam's driving ability. Even when he drives aggressively, he drives great. It's just, it's worse. There's no reason to make your chances of getting into an accident worse. So the whole thing is that with Adam, I just said it with words and it reached him.
Yeah, when you said those words, it was truth ringing in my ears. I was like, he's right. You know, he's saying something that's important. The words he's using is key to our health, and that truth rang in my head.
Okay, so not only does this, there are a lot of parts to this then, that this step is valuable in personal development, in your relationships, so that people can extend trust to you and have trust extended in response and know that by what you're saying. And also in promoting this path, that other Busas will be seen as reliable. And it's a good way to live. If you were to extend this to the general populace, that people are trustworthy and what they say is reliable, it's a good general moral thing to say. You have a lot of different good things come out because of this, and it helps build other people up as well. So yeah, it's a good step. I think it's a good step. If you were to reword it, is there anything you would change?
Yes, there are certain things that the thing is that rewording it is not in general helpful without the discussion behind it, because any way you reword it, the way someone interprets it is going to be completely randomly. It's going to fail in some aspect. So that's why I find it interesting and useful that we're going to have the conversation about it, because it explains it in better terms than just the sentences there. This is just a tidbit to help someone that is going to be on the path, right?
Yes,
rather than a full explanation.
For us, this paragraph acts as a tool as a reminder. But if we were to utilize it as an instruction, we would rewrite it.
I actually think it might be the other way around.
No, I don't think it's. I think it's too simple, and it doesn't include enough about trust to be relayed as a instruction to anyone, right? Like when I say instruction, I mean this is something you can hand to someone, and it could be anyone. But specifically, I see this paragraph as a tool for people who are working towards the path to utilize as a reminder for what the objective is.
Correct. For example, sorry, go ahead, Daniel.
I actually saw it as something of a directive. Like the step by itself, right? 5, live by your word. And that the explanation following it could be better or worse, right? But that the live by your word as its own is, like you said, a step on the path. And that it functions as a directive if you don't want or don't need to explain it. If somebody doesn't want that explanation.
And live by your word, that alone is enough. As long as someone is taking those 4 words seriously, that is alone is enough.
Okay. Correct. The reason for the explanation is to help put it into perspective for people who aren't just going to take live by your word and immediately understand what it means, which is why, like with Daniel, I probably could remove every single paragraph in this and just leave the title of each step, and Daniel would absorb a very large majority of it because he will do the thinking that is in the little paragraph, all the little extra examples, he's going to do that on his own, right? But the problem is that when we get someone that isn't like Daniel, that we're trying to get onto the path, we can give them this document and it's kind of more of a reminder. Let's put it that way. It's more of a reminder for them to stay on the path. And if they ever forget that, like right now, I have a girl named Stephanie who's on the path, and I sent her this document and she uses it as a reminder. Whenever she's feeling kind of like maybe she lost her way a little, or she's doing something incorrectly, or she encounters some sort of problem, she comes back to this document and she rereads it and she's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Like I need to be doing X, right, from the document. And then that helps her. So it's more of a reminder.
It also functions as a launch pad into discussion, as we've just proven.
Yeah.
So to wrap things up, we are a group of young men, although not to say the Busas are a group of young men, but us 3. And really our goal is to try to become better people, and utilize ourselves to help those around us to also become better people. And thus it'll slowly become a cycle of creating this family.
Correct.
Live by your word is a step towards becoming a better person. It's a step in the right direction that we see. Everything that we've said is formed from our own experiences. So if you disagree, that's your experiences talking to you.
I think that's a pretty solid way to conclude the podcast. So I hate to say without further ado again, but without further ado, let us call this the conclusion of the podcast. So I will be the first to say, fuck you, Craig. All right.
Yeah, fuck you, Craig.